Hello, I'm your moderator Fred Schmidt, and you're watching the Hendricks Heartbeat. Today our guest will be Paul Olson, one of the owners of the Development Services in Ivanhoe, Minnesota. Hello, Paul. He's been a resident of Hendricks for more than 2 years.
Forever.
We also have Tom Olson over here, who has been born in Hendricks, Minnesota, and moved back just over 2 years ago as well. Tom is the owner-operator of Games to Go, and an inflatable game company based out of Fargo, North Dakota. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Fred.
Yeah. We have Chet Frank here, also born and raised here in Hendricks, Minnesota, a certified airplane mechanic. We have Lisa Schmidt, who is a recent transplant of Hendricks, Minnesota, from Watertown, South Dakota. She has lived in Kentucky, Florida, and other areas of the United States as a behavior consultant. Lisa. I'm going to go ahead and start our first question of the day. More than one person has told me that one cannot blame President Bush for the huge amount of problems in this country during his tenure as president. My question is, how much can the president be blamed for the problems we face today? And if not, who do we assign responsibility for the huge problems our country faces, and to what degree? Anyone would like to take on that question right away?
Well, the question is, did we have any problems before he took office?
Well, I'd say yes, we had problems, but he came into office with a surplus as far as our total budget, and now the clock that unofficially tracked how great our deficit was getting just broke because they couldn't count it anymore. So they're actually creating a new clock to count our deficit.
Need a big clock.
I think it went over, I'm not sure what the number was. I think it was over 10 billion or something. I don't know.
I look at this whole, and I'm not a big Bush supporter. I'll go on and say that. But I don't think you can blame anything on one segment of the government. I mean, you have the House, the Senate, and the President. You've got checks and balances. I mean, one controlling party of one aspect cannot run roughshod over the others. So, I mean, there is checks and balances. I think this problem runs a lot deeper than that. I think it runs more into this, basically, the way society operates now. This changed from 30 years ago. I mean, people just do not live by the same rules that people used to.
But don't you think that in our society, don't you think we're missing something as far as responsibility? We have a president in charge. We have the Republican Party had been in charge up till the last 2 years. And who's taking responsibility for what's going on in our country?
You can't erase 8 years. The last 8 years have happened, and the last 8 years have been under a Republican White House, and for 6 of those 8 years, a Republican Congress. So I guess, in part, I don't think we've had the checks and balances that might have been in place, because you've had a presidency, I think, that has done everything it can do to overshadow Congress. And when you look at the economic problems, particularly I think within the financial world, I think one of the biggest issues has been the deregulation of the banking industry and the finance industry in this country. Some of the types of investments that have been concocted over the last several years just simply would not have been allowed under a more responsible form of regulation of these industries. We've let the cattle out of the barn, and now they're out messing up the cornfield. And how we fix it is going to be a heck of a challenge, I think. But I lay a lot of it at the foot of that press towards so much deregulation.
I think that there's more than enough responsibility to go around. I mean, it sets the stage. By having a president that uses executive privilege to override someone in this area to say, you can't bring in my aides, you can't bring in my people, and question them as the Congress, I think that that's problematic. But by the same token, once you set that stage and you have that deregulation in place, you've also got consumers that have not been well trained in handling money, and handling investments, and handling mortgages. And I think a lot of people signed adjustable rate mortgages and set the stage for an economic crisis. Because they made bad investments. They didn't understand your interest rate's gonna go up, and if your cost of living goes up and your interest rates go up, but your income doesn't go up in kind, you're in trouble. And who's gonna take over this mortgage when you can't make the payments? And I don't think people really understood. They were not well trained, but they also didn't take personal responsibility for it. When you're signing over $250,000 for a house, one would think that you'd actually read through the mortgage. And I'm not sure that everybody did. So I think that there's a lot of responsibility to go around. I don't think you lay it strictly on President Bush, but I certainly think he set the stage for it.
And when you have some lenders that would just come up and here's some magic that's gonna happen, and you won't have to make any payments on your mortgage virtually. There's a lot of ethical responsibility that I think comes down to some unethical behavior on the part of a lot of lenders.
Absolutely.
And that's, I don't know how they sleep at night.
You got a general public that wants it all and they want it now. And then you've got a lending organization that preys
Have it
on it.
all.
Yeah.
Can see that
Exactly.
it's gonna kill you, but you know what? It's gonna put some money in our pockets. So it's capitalism. I wanna prey on you.
And EY, P-R-E-Y, I think.
Yeah.
I think,
Pray.
yeah,
And then pray.
exactly.
With that said, one question, just kind of break off from that topic a little bit. What do you think about the ability of the Supreme Court to say to the president or to any of the president's men, so to speak, or women, that, hey, you guys need to come before Congress and, you know, and testify, because we've set out a subpoena for you, and then they just tell him, no, we're not going to come, and then they don't show up. Do you think that that's in previous history, the way I understand it, they had, before they could use executive privilege, they would have to first go to Congress and say, okay, I believe the conversation I had with the president falls under executive privilege. But now, no, I'm not going to go before Congress. Do you think that's okay?
Of course not. That destroys that whole system of checks and balances that Tom was mentioning. If you can't have department heads and White House officials sit before an investigative committee of Congress, then you have very little accountability. And you know, I'm the old gummer here at this table, but that's what got Richard Nixon in trouble so many years ago, is executive privilege. It's a hard thing to define, I think, because it has to exist in some respects.
Sure.
Because there are legitimate national security things that ought not be talked about. But when you just put this blanket of executive privilege over everything, so that your people don't have to answer any questions, that's wrong.
Yeah, it should be just, if it's classified information, they shouldn't have to say nothing, but other than that, I mean, they really should be speaking for us, so they should have to answer any question